Chelsea's dark secret didn't explode like a single scandalous headline. It seeped into Fairmont Crest the way poison seeps into groundwater, slow enough that people kept drinking from it, while insisting everything tasted fine. For so long, Chelsea had been the community's favorite illusion, the soft-eyed woman everyone labeled innocent, the one whose smile seemed to promise that love could still be clean in a place built on polished lies. That image became her armor, and also her trap, because the moment she stepped outside of it quietly, recklessly, repeatedly, she didn't just betray Madison, she betrayed the identity that kept her safe. And in Fairmont Crest, losing your identity is worse than losing your lover, because reputation is the only currency that never stops accruing interest. Chelsea's affair with a drug dealer wasn't merely a romantic deviation. It was a fracture in the social structure, a crack that let everyone glimpse what they feared most, that anyone, even the purest, can be hungry enough to ruin themselves. The first signs were almost too small to name: late nights that came with no real explanation, a phone that never left her hand, a new kind of tension in her posture, as if she were always bracing for an impact only she could see. Madison noticed because she loved Chelsea closely, and love has a way of making patterns louder. Yet even as Madison's instincts sharpened, she didn't confront. She watched, she tracked, she collected, not because she enjoyed suspicion, but because suspicion felt safer than heartbreak. A direct question would have forced a direct answer, and Madison wasn't sure she could survive the truth if it came too soon. There is a specific kind of self-protection in surveillance. It postpones humiliation. It allows a person to pretend they are still in control. It also allows denial to masquerade as caution, because as long as Madison was still gathering facts, she could tell herself the story had not ended. And maybe, underneath all that caution, Madison already suspected something long before she admitted it even. If only as a flicker of doubt, she kept smothering with trust, because loving Chelsea had become part of how she understood herself. To suspect Chelsea was to suspect her own judgment, and Madison's pride was not petty. It was survival. In Fairmont Crest, being fooled is treated like weakness, and Madison had spent too long earning her place to let anyone watch her fall apart. So she turned her pain into strategy, her fear into focus, and waited for certainty. Chelsea, meanwhile, was splitting into two lives that refused to stay separate. One life was tenderness with Madison's soft rituals, familiar warmth, a love that felt like home and therefore demanded she be better. The other life was the drug dealer or intensity, danger dressed as attention, the addictive thrill of being seen not as an icon of innocence, but as a person capable of darkness. The contrast made everything sharper. With Madison, Chelsea felt loved and safe, but also watched by the expectations that came with being loved. With him, she felt reckless, desired, freed from the identity she had been handed. That freedom didn't arrive as peace, it arrived as compulsion. Chelsea didn't stop because she couldn't stop. Guilt stalked her, but guilt in itself is not a cure. It is often only the shadow of desire, and sometimes desire is stronger. Each time Chelsea promised herself it would be the last time, she was really bargaining with herself, trying to buy one more moment of escape before returning to the person she should be. The more she lied, the heavier she became, and the heavier she became, the more she needed the affair to feel light again. She wasn't simply falling for a man. She was falling for the sensation of stepping outside her own cage. Yet the drug dealer was not simply an affair partner. He was an engine of consequences, and he didn't need Chelsea's love the way she needed his adrenaline. His presence carried its own darkness and agenda that felt too calculated to be accidental, a way of pushing Chelsea closer to danger with every meeting, every demand, every insinuation that she owed him more than secrecy. Chelsea told herself she was choosing this because it is easier to believe you are choosing your ruin than to admit you are being guided into it. But the questions kept bleeding through her denial. Was he a random collision? Or did he approach her because he knew exactly who she was? In a community like Fairmont Crest, No one touches a socialite by accident. If he targeted Chelsea, then Chelsea was never the endgame, she was the door. And if she was the door, what was he trying to enter? As the affair's fingerprints began to appear, missed calls, uncharacteristic coldness, sudden disappearances, Fairmont Crest did what it always does. It sensed weakness and turned it into entertainment. Secondary characters began to catch small clues, and those clues turned into whispers, and whispers turned into the kind of collective suspicion that makes a neighborhood feel like a courtroom without a judge. People didn't need proof to feel satisfaction. They needed only the possibility of disgrace, because disgrace gives everyone else temporary relief from their own secrets. The tension built not just between Chelsea and Madison, but around them, like a storm gathering over every social gathering, every casual invitation, every look that lingered too long. Chelsea's secrecy became a public temperature, rising until it was impossible to ignore. And when it finally cracked, when someone saw what they weren't supposed to see, when an encounter became undeniable, when the drug dealer's shadow collided with Chelsea's curated world, the confrontation was not intimate. It was public. It was humiliating. It was the kind of exposure that does not merely end the relationship, it rewrites the story of it, turning every tender moment into evidence of manipulation. Madison's devastation did not arrive as melodrama. It arrived as a cold, sinking clarity, the kind that makes the body feel numb while the mind becomes painfully precise. Anger came next, not as a tantrum, but as a controlled fire. Chelsea had not only cheated, she had endangered them. She had invited crime into their lives. She had forced Madison into a role she never wanted. The betrayed woman, the naive woman, the one everyone pities behind her back. Madison's grief had teeth, and Chelsea, cornered, could not even fully defend herself, because any explanation sounded like an excuse, and any excuse only confirmed a betrayal. She loved Madison, and that was the tragedy, because love did not stop her. It only made her hate herself more. She wanted to say she was lonely. She was craving risk. She was trying to understand whether her desire was shifting towards something Madison couldn't give, whether she was drawn to the forbidden masculinity of a man who represented a different kind of life. She wanted to admit that sometimes love feels like being seen too clearly, and being seen too clearly can make a person panic. But none of those truths repaired the damage. They only complicated it, and complication is not the same as forgiveness. The drug dealer's motives grew darker as the fallout unfolded. He did not disappear when exposed. If anything, he tightened his grip, because exposure gave him leverage. He could threaten Chelsea with further humiliation, with legal consequences, with violence directly or indirectly, because now she had something to lose in a way she had never lost before. And Madison, watching the situation escalate, faced a brutal paradox. If she walked away, she protected herself, but she might be abandoning Chelsea to someone dangerous. If she stayed involved, she risked being pulled into the same spiral that had already shredded her heart. That is where the story becomes more than betrayal, it becomes psychological warfare. Madison must decide what kind of person grief will turn her into. Will she forgive, not because Chelsea deserves it, but because Madison refuses to let pain make her cruel? Or will she choose revenge, not as an emotional reaction, but as a deliberate act of reclaiming power in a community that respects power more than compassion? Revenge in Fairmont Crest is seductive because it can be justified as justice. Madison can tell herself she's protecting others, exposing a threat, cleansing the community. Yet the question remains, to punish Chelsea, would Madison have to become the very kind of cold, calculating person she once believed she was above? Would she have to sink to the level of the betrayal, weaponizing secrets, humiliating Chelsea the way Chelsea humiliated her, turning love into a public execution? And if Madison does that, does she win? Or does she simply become another part of the rot that makes Fairmont Crest so dangerous? The possibility that the drug dealer is connected to shadowy figures within the community, someone like Joey or Randy, turns this from a private scandal into a larger conspiracy. If Chelsea was targeted, if her affair was engineered, then the relationship wasn't the only thing being manipulated. The community itself was being tested, infiltrated, and destabilized. Chelsea's fall could have been a planned trigger, a way to create chaos, to distract from other schemes, to weaken alliances by forcing people to choose sides. Fairmont Crest thrives on control, and nothing disrupts control faster than a scandal that turns everyone's attention outward, while the real predators move quietly underneath. Madison, with her ability to read patterns, is uniquely positioned to see that. This is why she followed instead of confronting, not only because she feared the truth, but because part of her sensed there was something larger moving behind the betrayal, something that didn't feel like a simple affair. Now, in the aftermath, she must decide whether she is willing to become Chelsea's protector again, not as a partner, but as a shield against forces Chelsea may have foolishly invited into their lives. Can Madison save Chelsea? Possibly, but saving someone is not the same as forgiving them. Madison may be able to dismantle the drug dealer's leverage, expose his connections, pull Chelsea out of immediate danger. Yet even if she succeeds, the emotional wreckage remains. Trust is not repaired by rescue. Chelsea might survive physically, but she may lose everything else: her place in the community, her friendships, her sense of self, and the love she took for granted. And Madison, even if she plays the hero, may discover that heroism does not heal humiliation. It only adds another layer to her pain because it forces her to care for someone who broke her. As Fairmont Crest reacts, alliances shift. People who once smiled at Chelsea now treat her like contamination. Others, opportunistic, use her scandal as cover for their own schemes. The community becomes a stage where everyone is performing morality while quietly committing their own sins, and Chelsea's disgrace becomes the convenient distraction that allows darker plans to move forward. The atmosphere thickens with paranoia. Everyone wonders what else is hidden. Everyone wonders who the drug dealer truly answers to. Everyone wonders whether the next secret to surface will be theirs. And in that claustrophobic tension, violence becomes more plausible, not because the story needs shock, but because desperation always escalates when people feel cornered. Chelsea is cornered by guilt, by danger, by social collapse. Madison is cornered by rage, by grief, by the temptation to weaponize her intelligence. The drug dealer is cornered by exposure, and therefore becomes more dangerous. And Fairmont Crest itself is cornered by the realization that its gates do not keep darkness out, they keep it trapped inside until it explodes. The story's bloody shock does not arrive out of nowhere. It arrives as the inevitable consequence of secrets colliding with power. A confrontation that should have been private becomes public. A threat that should have been taken seriously becomes dismissed until it is too late. A desperate attempt to regain control turns into a moment no one can undo. And just when everyone believes they have identified the real problem, Chelsea's betrayal, the final twist, lands with a terrible clarity. The betrayal was only the spark. The real fire is the network of hidden motives spreading through Fairmont Crest. The possibility that Chelsea was never merely unfaithful, but selected, set up, and used as the first domino in a chain designed to spill blood and expose just how fragile this community truly is.